This episode of Artist Decoded is brought to you by No Wave Academy. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned professional, No Wave Academy is your ultimate educational resource to help bring your artistry to the next level. Our renowned roster of instructors include Nick Runge, Mia Bergeron, Sean Cheatham, Kate Zambrano, David Chaffetz, Paul Christina, John Wentz, and many more. Some of these artists have appeared on this very podcast, while others have been featured in exhibitions at the No Wave Gallery and museums around the world. Here at No Wave Academy, we believe that everyone has a unique artistic expression. With guidance, experience, and the proper tools, students have the ability to invigorate and elevate their work. Unlock and unblock your inner creative voice. Join us and walk into the next chapter of your personal artistic evolution. Go to nowaveacademy.com. Type in AD-10 at checkout for 10% off. That's nohwaveacademy.com. Now, on to the episode. Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. This is your host Yoshino, and you're listening to episode number 203 of Artist Decoded. My guest today is my very good and longtime friend, photographer and director, Graham Dunn. Graham and I both started our photography careers roughly around the same time. He's always been a confidant and colleague of mine since the start, and it's been amazing to see his growth both as a person and in his practice as a commercial working photographer. And you might have seen his work for brands such as Abercrombie & Fitch, Anthropologie, Free People, Lucky Brand, Old Navy, and Vans, or his work in fashion publications such as Elle or InStyle. I remember back in the day, we used to grab lunch to talk shop and to share various struggles and triumphs. And I've always felt at ease when talking to Graham, so I'm really glad that I'm able to share this conversation with him on this podcast. And having that sense of community has always been very important to me. I feel grateful that I'm able to share these conversations with you all and to communicate the triumphs and struggles of the creatives that intrigue me. I'm interested in exploring the complexities that reside in the mind and to show the humanity of the artists and creatives that I love and admire. I also want to continually spread positivity, to be supportive of my fellow peers rather than to be competitive, because at the end of the day, love for our fellow humans is all that really matters. And let me preface this episode, but in the beginning of the conversation, before we started recording, Graham pointed out this Ricoh GR, which is a digital point-and-shoot camera that was sitting on my desk. I then started to talk about Daido Moriyama and Takuma Nakahira, which are two Japanese photographers that have made a huge impact on my perspective as a photographer. And Daido famously used Ricoh film cameras to capture his black and white images before switching to their digital systems. We then talked about my personal lineage of being Japanese American and how during World War II, my family was thrown in concentration camps in both California and Hawaii. I then went into the story of how my great-grandfather's land was stripped away from him from the American government during this time and how that has shaped my family's history. And I think this is super important to state, especially during Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Although it wasn't my initial intention to talk about this to him, but it's good to be aware of the history, social implications, and systemic racism that has shaped the United States. And although it's painful, it's good to talk about these things rather than to sweep them under the rug for them to lay dormant and bleeding into the shadows. And hopefully that explanation gives a bit of context to the first few minutes of the conversation. But I think I've talked a little bit too much, so I'm going to let you all listen to this interview. So thank you all so much for tuning in. This is a really good and personal conversation with me and my friend, Graham Dunn. So I hope you all enjoy it. My mom would tell me this story during that time period. So my great grandfather on her mom's side. So my great grandfather basically became she said that he was always like drinking like boxed wine and just getting drunk all the time because he like lost millions and millions of dollars of land in Watsonville, is where she's originally from, because of World War II.
It was just taken from him?
It was just taken from him. Yeah. And the only way that you could keep land is if you gave it to someone that is like a family friend that wasn't Japanese.
And they could like hold it for you or something?
They could hold it for you. But they didn't necessarily have to give it back either.
This is like the stuff you don't learn in school. Like we learned a little, like you touch on it as part of World War II in general, but like, you know what? They're doing a better job now, I think, of telling the real stuff, you know, based on like, you know, what I see my son learn and what Jess teaches her kindergartners and stuff. But that kind of stuff, like, well, I don't think they really focus on that much when I was growing up. Did you learn that aside, like in school?
No. Yeah. No, I didn't learn that at all.
That's gnarly.
Yeah. It's super gnarly. Yeah.
It's just interesting, like, that camera. Cause, yeah, that's a cool link, I guess, to your heritage, you know?
Yeah.
Cause he's just like, I don't know. Yeah. He's just so cool. I love his pictures.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, man, maybe I should have recorded that part in the beginning, but it's okay.
It's cool.
Yeah. I think, I bought this. It's a first generation Ricoh GR because of that, specifically with Daido Moriyama. But I don't know, it's just kind of fun to have like a little point and shoot. But yeah, I think about that more, about cultural heritage and things like that as I'm getting older and just more socially aware of things and and all those things.
Yeah. Makes sense. I'm reading a book right now that I'm only partway through called Lost Japan, about. It's basically essays about all different stuff, like theater and like country life and all that stuff. And
like no dance theater?
Yeah. And kabuki, and like how, I guess like there's like a certain, I guess in Japan, embrace of kind of eccentricity and artistry and that kind of stuff, as well as traditional stuff. And so like he's talking about the theater as this interesting mix between both things kind of. But yeah, I feel like Daido Moriyama and other people, like there is like I don't know, he's just doing something original basically. It's cool because there are a lot of traditions and old culture and like social norms and things, but also there's room for people to be themselves and like be like an eccentric character kind of, you know, or like pursue their own art or whatever it is. Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Like I've heard that about England too. Like they embrace eccentricity in a certain way, as opposed to like squashing people into a certain category, you know, or whatever. So anyway, the book's really interesting, but I'm only partway through.
Wait, what do you mean in terms of England and hiring creatives, or what do you mean?
Oh no, I just, you know, I wish I could remember who was talking about that, but basically just like, it could be anything in fashion, in life, whatever it would be, that like England kind of embraces people who are individuals and like are unique, eccentric characters, like in the way they dress or the way they live their life or their houses or whatever it is. Like that's an interesting like cultural touch point for them, I guess, is that, you know, eccentric stuff is interesting to them, I guess, as opposed to trying to make society, you know, every person kind of similar or follow the rules kind of.
Yeah.
I thought that's interesting.
Do you find that to be like the homogenization of culture? I mean, you know, talking about like the commercial, like your experiences being a commercial photographer, do you see that happening more in the US as opposed to other places around the world?
I mean, I guess, you know, and that stuff about Japan and England is kind of just like people's opinions on it, you know, so I don't know if that's fact or fiction, not having actually lived in those places, just visiting. But, I mean, I think there's something about that to some extent, or maybe that's human nature in some ways. Like a bad side of human nature is like I definitely remember like as a kid getting teased for whatever thing I did that was different, or, you know, I don't know. Like I just remember like being maybe a little bit eccentric myself, and that was seen as like outsider to some people. And I think a lot of people experience that probably. I don't know if that's a part of human nature of like trying to fit people in boxes, you know, as like our little tribes or whatever that is, or if the US has more of that going on for whatever reason. I would think like traditional work life, and like when I worked in like an office a little bit, you know, that kind of stuff, that seemed like the norm, is like just follow the rules basically. But I don't know.
I think that can be really detrimental over time, is to try to fit your personality into a work culture, for instance, but your personality is something other than that specific work culture. Like, I think that could be actually really damaging to the way, I mean, I don't know if this is my own hypothesis, but just like an observational thing is, I think a lot of people that, encounter that midlife crisis sort of thing, encounter that because, and I'm no, clinical psychologist or anything, but probably encounter that sort of thing because they've been essentially lying to themselves for a long period of time, maybe working in an environment that isn't actually suited to their personality, but they're there for either a certain social construct or survival needs, or what they think is survival needs, but
yeah, I think that's probably true. Also, it seemed like kind of maybe more in a slightly older days, even if you didn't love your job, you did it because it was like part of a sacrifice of like whatever for your family or whatever it was, you just kept grinding away. And now we have like more options maybe, or it's more commonplace to follow your dreams, or it's like a luxury we have, or any of those things, I guess. But it is nice. And like, I don't know that I would have done well in like a traditional, quote unquote, traditional workplace. And I don't know how much those exist anymore either necessarily.
Yeah.
It's hard to say not having been a part of that. I guess so. There's definitely a temptation to like fall into trends and things, I think, with whatever art or photography or something. You and I had mentioned this earlier, but that kind of homogenization, or like you just see stuff like a genre or a trend or something in photography and you think like, oh, these people are, making money at this, or this is a successful thing right now, or like people love this or whatever. And there's a temptation to kind of go that route, And like, I've talked to my rep about that, like, oh, should I be shooting more, whatever it is, athletic stuff or what, And she's basically like, just do the thing you like, because the right people will see that, and, you're developing something you enjoy, and that's helpful.
Yeah.
So that's reassuring. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, just from watching your commercial and also just like your success as a photographer, like it seems like you've always been following certain things of interest. I mean, it seems like you have a very specific approach to the way that you see an image, and it doesn't seem like you're all over the place or you're like swayed in certain things. I mean, I understand that there's a certain struggle that happens when you want to get more commercial clients and things like that. So then you might think, you would need to cater in a specific way. And that's just kind of like the struggle of finding a certain client that could hire you.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true. And I remember, cause we've known each other a long time. I remember
very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. You were one of the first people I met when I moved here, I think.
When did you move to LA?
I moved here in 2009. I don't know when we met, but certainly we've known each other a while, probably 10 years, don't you think? Or something like that.
Yeah.
But
I remember seeing your images on Fashion Gone Rogue.
Oh yeah. That was the goal back in the day.
Yeah, that was
the pinnacle, dude. I remember being so excited.
That and Ben Travato.
Oh yeah. I don't know if that's around anymore.
I don't think so.
That's another one too. Yeah. Yeah. We were all like hustling to get on there.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was interesting. It was like me, you, Amon, and then Conan.
Yeah.
Amon Montalvan and Conan Tai, if anyone wants to look up their names. But I don't know. It's interesting to think of that community incubator and how important that is to have a specific community to share certain struggles with, and then to find some solace in, when you're going through those struggles. And I think that's like super important to growth, to have that community. And also, it's interesting to be able to have a conversation now because I don't know, we've just grown in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. And you hone in over time, like on the things that interest you, mostly by trial and error, or often. And so as the years go on, you kind of know like a yes and a no to certain questions, like this is the thing I like. This is the thing that's like not me, other people do that better, whatever that is. So yeah, I think it is cool. Like it is helpful to have each other and a community over time. Cause as photographers, you're kind of I wouldn't say rivals necessarily, but you don't meet each other because you're not both being hired on set or something. You just, one person gets picked. And so like to meet each other and like talk shop a little and stuff is like really reassuring, especially at the beginning when you're just like totally lost, you know, and you basically just have to like power through everything kind of and see who survives, I guess, you know, because you know, that's how it is at the beginning a bit. But I remember, I remember like, just to harken back to what we were talking about in the beginning, like I remember you saying, I was like nervous that my stuff was all over the place, my pictures. And you said like, oh no, it feels like you, like your voice is there no matter, you know, what kind of thing it is. And I remember like being reassured by that, like, cause that was years ago you said that. And I was like, okay, cool. Like to an outsider, it seems like I'm on a certain path, I guess, you know, which internally you don't necessarily see cause you're just trying everything and seeing what works for you kind of. And like, you're someone who's done a lot of different genres and a lot of different disciplines, I think, and are now kind of, it seems like combining all those worlds together. Yeah.
I think, you know, something that I've talked about this on the podcast before, and a lot of this has to go, I've come to these conclusions because I've been through a lot of various struggles in my personal life and in career and things like that. But I call it my non-compartmentalization approach. And I also like am kind of weary of like coining terms because I think that's very much like embedded in sort of like, you know, when there's like certain public speakers or things like that, and they're trying to like sell you a product or something. But this is just the way that I internalize it, is the non-compartmentalization approach. And that's basically like combining everything. And I also associate this with like chain wrestling, with fighting. So it's like you chain things together so that they all fit into the same world essentially. But in chain wrestling, you're trying to combine these tactics in order to gain the advantage, right? So, I mean, you can bring that back to like the art of war. You know, if you know yourself and you know like your surroundings, then you'll win every battle or something like that. Right? And that could be an internal battle or an external battle. But I think I've spent lots and lots of time thinking about why to do certain things or what that means, and almost to my detriment in some ways, because that is part of the internal struggle. But I think in the end, like I've found a lot of solitude in examining these things from multiple angles. Yeah, that makes sense. And also like you don't always know where these pursuits will head until one day suddenly, it's like when you're in school, like, I don't know if you experience this, but like, I remember being like multiple different classes, like science and history and all that. And like certain times it'd be like, oh, this thing we're studying here syncs with this thing unintentionally. I don't think they were intentionally synced in the curriculum. It's just like the things you learned, the seemingly like disparately, are all related and you didn't even know. So like all those different pursuits, once they kind of all dovetail, is pretty cool. So that not compartmentalizing things is like a helpful way to get all those angles you talked about on the same thing, you know, which is, that can only be helpful, I think. Yeah. You know? Yeah. I think observing all the non sequiturs and trying to figure out a way to where they all can converge, the confluence of non sequiturs or something to that effect. Yeah. But what I wanted to ask you too is just from your time being a photographer and being a working photographer, like all these years, because I've basically have been on the outside of that world for a while now, but I was wondering like where you've seen the pros and cons of how everything has changed and how images are more accessible through your phone and those sort of things. But has that changed like certain rates that you've got, or has like how exactly has it changed for you?
Yeah, it's hard to say because like I'm 35, so I started at a time when it was like not everyone was shooting film, not everyone was having, you know, $150,000 days. You weren't taking 4 pictures in a day, or you know, like things were already like, in my mind, there's been like a nice diversity of imagery that exists now because there's all different styles and film and digital and different types of people being represented and all that sort of thing, which is to me positives. But I never came in at a time when it was like these huge ad days or something like that. It's always been like to some extent creative, but also utilitarian kind of, and I think things have gotten even more so like that because everything's way faster with Instagram and email. Like, I get email blasts from people every single day, like multiple ones, so the amount and the speed of imagery has gone up exponentially. And so it's made the jobs, like some jobs, more utilitarian, like you're gathering data in some ways. It's like there's a video team and you're shooting, landscape and vertical, and you're shooting all these different assets to all different usage in the end. And so, it seems like, rates are decent. Shot counts are really high. I think, the amount of looks per day, and also if you're talking like fashion stuff, clothes, amount of looks per day is pretty high. The amount of deliverables is super high, I think, because people just like want data. Like they're just hungry for like all this like assets and data and stuff like that. And that's one downside I guess I've noticed too, is like sometimes it's the cart leading the horse. Like people look at metrics on their website, especially for bigger companies, and they see like, oh, this certain thing performed well, whatever it is. And sometimes they make up reasons that to me seem slightly arbitrary, like, oh, it's because we shot this on the beach, or it's because this person has brown hair, or it's because this person's wearing these two jackets, or whatever it is, and people kind of put a lot of eggs in that basket, and then they'll just like start going after those things super hard. Like now we're just shooting on the beach right now, or whatever it is. When in the end, it was like that cool candid moment is what made that picture successful to your metrics. And so trying to break it down and then shoot to each detail and see if you can make that lightning in a bottle again, I don't think it always works out. And so it makes things get a little bit sterile, and it's better probably to try to just have those same kind of spontaneous situations of all kinds, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. But how much autonomy do you have in those situations where you're talking to a client and maybe they say something that, oh, we need to shoot this on the beach because we've observed the metrics for things? Like, do you fight that, or do you say, or do you give an opinion, or, I mean, like, what would you do in that particular situation?
Yeah, it's a good question. It really depends. Mostly I just do what they say, if I'm honest, because, for a really straight up commercial job, you're there to do a job. You're there to fulfill a brief for someone. It's usually pretty clear what you're up to. Often, especially with bigger clients where they have more employees and more people, creative directing and doing graphic design and planning their emails and, whatever, that stuff's kind of set before you're set. And so often I'm showing up knowing it'll be a beach shoot or at a house or what it's for. And it's usually themed around something, denim or whatever. And so, usually I don't have a lot of autonomy there. I just try to get that nice moment, that candid moment, and show the product. And, there's satisfaction to me in like fulfilling a brief and having a happy client, because, that side of my job is sort of the more utilitarian side, I guess, like that's how I basically make money, if you put it bluntly, And so I derive satisfaction from like a job well done, basically, and giving them what they wanted or something better, and maybe even a twist on it. And sometimes I'll shoot things two ways, or I'll try options. Often I do, just to give them other things, and see maybe one thing works better than another. You can't always plan and go in thinking like, oh, this is going to be the one. But then for my other part of my life that's more like personal projects or editorial or zines or any of those other like sort of free form things, those no rules, those are just based on whatever we're doing that day, whatever we've discussed as a team usually.
Yeah. Do you find that you have a healthy balance between personal projects and commercial projects?
Yeah, I think so. I try to, but if the commercial projects are rolling in, which sometimes that happens seasonally or whatever, then obviously like those take precedent, because I basically don't turn down things. I try not to turn down things. If like the job seems like I'm the right person for it and it's pretty viable to do it, I'll try to do it. And that'll supersede personal work for sure, just because, I got a family and stuff. And and I enjoy it. It's like everyday shooting is fun. One way or the other, I enjoy it. Even the stressful ones, even the really challenging, hard ones. Yeah. There's satisfaction in that too. And so like, to me, a day shooting is like I enjoy it. So I never feel like, oh, I got to work today. I want to be doing my personal thing,
Because, I think that's, Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I think, you can bring this back to like Taoism or whatever, but just being present in the moment, I think is the most beneficial thing, especially if you've signed up in that specific moment to service the client. Mm-hmm. It's how are you going to make it the most enjoyable for everyone,
Yeah,
but
it's so true.
Yeah, but I was also thinking, do you think that working with various clients, a lot of it has to do, like, are you very observant of the human psychology and the social situations that you're put in those moments?
I try to be aware of things. Like, I think basically like the secret to my pictures is like I've staked my whole thing on usually decent prep, like a good amount of prep, so that in the moment we can be as like loose and free as possible. And that way we can get kind of more candid and realistic feeling pictures in an ideal world, you know? And so being aware of everything that's going on is helpful. I try not to let it way too heavy on me. And I think clients who shoot a lot and really know the ins and outs of how photo shoots go are tuned to that as well.
Attuned to,
like, they're tuned to just the mood of the set and that sort of thing. And they, even though it's like, obviously like money's being lit on fire when you're doing shoots, they don't make it feel like that. You know, it's not like we have to get this, you know, there's not that level of pressure, which allows you to take better photos, I think, because for me shooting, like, I'm aware of those other things. I'm able to kind of like maybe put blinders onto it a little bit when I need to not be thinking about like, oh, this is costing the client money or whatever it is. For me, it's like, because I basically shoot fashion stuff, which is almost always on humans. Like, for me, the model is number one paramount. Like, if I'm to be friends with anyone, it's with that person. If I'm to make anyone feel comfortable or have a rapport with someone, it's that person, you know? And I can kind of like, obviously you want to fulfill the client brief and keep them happy, but if the model's happy and feeling comfortable and like, this is a safe space basically to, you know, experiment and try like whatever, like do crazy stuff and not feel like a fool kind of, you know, then that'll be successful for the client. And so in that moment, I can kind of, you know, ignore them a bit and just focus my whatever psychological tuning in on the person that I'm interacting with directly, you know, if that makes sense. So that's like my, I guess, kind of secret or something to candidness, I guess. And it's weird because like some of that stuff's inherent to how you are. Like, I'm kind of quiet and stuff. So like some of those things is just inherent to you, and it's not about technique or tricks or any of that stuff. It's just like, someone does it one way, someone does it another. Other people like really get people hyped up and happy and they're having fun, and that works great too. And they play music and they're really outgoing, you know, and that works for them. And probably the results are maybe similar, you know?
Yeah.
But the technique to get there is different. And I think that's just like an individual thing you learn by like trial and error, basically.
Yeah.
Is that what you were asking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, just based off what you were saying, it's interesting to observe those situations and to understand how energy brings different types of people together, you know? So the client or, you know, the vibe that they give off is, it might be like more of like a wild party sort of vibe. And then so maybe they might want to have a photographer that's more so attuned to that, you know, that wants to have that sort of like wild sort of like party environment or something. Or maybe they might want to have someone that's more like you, that's more quiet and, you know, more observant and those sort of things. So I always find it interesting to see how people gravitate towards each other and what that means, or potentially what it doesn't mean, but you know, just understanding the human psychology behind that, I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, that is interesting. And seeing like how all different people approach, you know, shooting an editorial for the same magazine or for the same client, because people of all kinds shoot for one brand, you know, and so how the results and how they interact and how they do things is super varied, I think. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. So speaking about the editorial world, because I've been so far removed from the editorial world for like so long, I was wondering, so for like some of these bigger publications, do they still pay, or do they pay?
Yes, they do. The bigger ones pay, and the bigger one, not usually a ton, but they do to some extent. And they also have budgets, which is nice, you know, of various scales. Things are still pretty scrappy, I'd say, often, you know, but having a budget just where people are like, maybe you have an RV for hair and makeup, or like there's catering or that sort of stuff is nice, because it's not so DIY. there's definitely that side. And in fact, a lot of the cooler kind of indie magazines, it is kind of on you to deal with that however you choose, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You could spend as much or as little money as you want. And it's the age old thing of like, do you shoot a cool editorial and spend your own money there, which then leads to clients who like that and want you to shoot not necessarily something similar, but thought that was cool or noticed it. So it's always a decision to be made, I guess. And honest truth is like a lot of editorials I shoot, I just go all in with the budget, you know, like instead of like trying to extract money for me to keep, I'll just spend it on like having a great assistant, shooting film and getting it processed, that kind of stuff. Cause I know even if it's kind of a break even prospect, like the pictures will be better. And then, man, if I've learned anything, it's that you never know where work comes from, you know, like anything could lead to anything. Like one client I shoot for all the time, it's like, you know, like a big client for me. I got, cause I shot a test for like an hour just for fun with not like just film, natural light, just for kicks with a friend of mine. But they somehow saw that and thought, oh, that's cool. You could work for us. And so I have ever since for years now. And I got super lucky with that, but I don't think I've ever gotten a job from like, not that you shouldn't, but going to like a mixer or something like that, or like networking, you know, the traditional routes, which work for a lot of people. Like I said, I'm quiet. It's not my way.
Yeah. And plus you have a family too, so you can't be going out and partying all the time.
Right. Yeah.
I don't even know if that's,
I don't know what people do.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't really, I can't really see you being that sort of person either. You know, someone that's really like a socialite or something like that.
Oh man, no way.
Graham the socialite.
No, dude, strength in numbers. I don't like going places alone, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's another thing too that's like super helpful is like how you and I have known each other and have like, you know, a little network as like a sounding board to talk about whatever projects and stuff. Like that's helpful. It's the same for shoots or like going to whatever function or something. Like seeing a familiar face is super helpful. And like as time goes on and you can kind of be allowed to hire a team you trust often for clients, you know, like hair, makeup, models you've worked with, Digitech, assistant, all that kind of stuff. Like that helps so much because you've got like your little family. You all know what to do. You all have like a rapport with each other. You've spent a lot of time together. That makes things so much more comfortable and easy. It's really nice because then you're not just walking into the first day of school alone, which is, truth be told, like often the case with clients because, you know, you work for new people all the time. They all know each other and you don't. And navigating that is a big part of the job, I think, and kind of an unexpected one. Like the amount of time taking pictures versus like Zoom calls or whatever is like 50-50 these days, I think, you know?
So, you mean Zoom calls to get new clients or to talk about certain client briefs? Yeah,
usually it's like prep kind of things, or like sometimes people just want to have like, we just want to meet you kind of thing, you know? And so things have gone back almost to that old way of when you used to go around with your book and go to meetings, you know, which I think maybe stopped for a while and especially because of COVID, obviously, but I think it's back around a little bit. I've had a few that's just like, we just wanted to see what you're like kind of thing. Yeah. And they're talking to a few people.
Yeah.
And so...
What did you do during the time when, like, you know, the first parts of COVID, when there wasn't a lot of production shooting? What were you doing during those times?
Yeah, well, at first, like everyone, I just thought, oh, this will be a couple of weeks, you know. A lot of jobs just pushed at first, and then pretty soon I lost like all the jobs that I was holding because no one could shoot. A lot of them were travel even, so those had to go away for sure. And then, you know, my wife and son, my wife's a teacher and my son's in school. And so I kind of helped him a little bit with school and getting all that stuff going when it was time. But yeah, I just basically made up little projects for myself during COVID, like out of interest and also to get my, you know, my brain to work and learn new skills. Cause I'm like kind of a nerdy guy. Like I like computers and, you know, that kind of stuff. And I used to work in post-production and like, you know, do compositing and stuff. So I did a bunch of things. One thing I did was get, I got an old Toshiba laptop from like the 80s. It had like an orange screen, like orange monochrome screen. It was super, super old.
And they had laptops in the 80s?
They did, but the thing's a chunk, dude. It's pretty big. It's like, you know, this thick. And it flips up and it has a tiny little screen and then a mechanical keyboard. But I bought it broken off of eBay for pretty cheap. And so I gutted that and I put in a new screen and a Raspberry Pi. And I soldered in some LEDs and some touch sensitive buttons and stuff and made this and stickers and things I ordered. And I kind of made this like cyberpunk little computer. that shows videos I've made, like little clips, like loops. It has 3 different loops, which it shows endlessly running on a Raspberry Pi. So it basically just looks like an old cyberpunk computer, like Neuromancer or something, just showing these video loops. 2 of which are CGI that I made, little animations that look kind of like geometric. And then another one that's like a 16 millimeter little video, black and white. But it just shows them in a loop. You could load whatever you want on there. But yeah, so I made this like weird little video player that's kind of like retro future. And that was one project that took a while. And another one that was kind of interesting is I wish I could remember. It's a Japanese artist who was in like the 70s, and he did a lot of early experimental stuff with like stop motion and also light trails, and kind of this like dragging the shutter, so you get these like trails of light around things. And he also did a lot of what looks like 3D, but I think is much earlier than that. It'd be like a cube with videos playing on it that would rotate and stuff. But I think it was physically printed out photos he made cubes of and then rotated. So he's doing this like stop motion thing that kind of looked like CG. It's all on film, and it's like 40, 50 years old. But anyway, I thought that was super cool, and I wanted to try to learn 3D software so I could make these kind of like, basically like retro vaporwavy kind of things. So I started doing that. And I found out I could make like sculptures, like abstract stuff in there, all different sculptures. So that's what I did for a few months, is just make these weird 3D sculptures, which are supposed to look realistic, and they're textured with like often watercolors I painted or other things, real elements that are put into the computer, and I use them as a
do you do that
render.
Do you do that in your downtime, like paint?
Absolutely not. No, I'm terrible. I can't draw, can't paint, can't do any of that. I think that's why I do photography. So the watercolors is just like abstract, like splatters or like just little streaks and stuff like that. See. But once you scan them in and use them to texture like a vase or something, they kind of look cool, and I can like jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing. Like I can just like kind of do enough little piecemeal things to make something interesting. I just made a bunch of those for fun and then never did it again, basically. So, but yeah, I did a lot of that stuff during that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have any moments? Were those projects essentially keeping you sane during the downtime of not being able to shoot for clients and things of that nature?
I think so, because like I've always been a person who likes to do something or learn something new. And I figured it would all eventually meet itself somewhere, like I have an interest in being like a video artist of some kind. And like a long time ago, I was shooting for just a hair care brand, but we were at the client's house, which was like this cool modern house. And she had this art piece that some friend of hers had made that was like a flat screen TV with a clear screen that you could see right through. And when you turned it on, these antennas, like old-fashioned car antennas, would extend out across the screen, which was just clear glass basically, and make a sort of like line that connected, like almost like a little thin metal bridge in this clear pane of glass. And then somehow people who'd been filmed would walk across that little bridge thing. And they were like little miniature videos of people, but on a clear screen. So they looked like they were floating, or like you were looking into this strange window. And it was like one of the first pieces of video art I'd ever seen that like somebody owned in their house. Because anytime I've ever seen it, it was always like in an installation or a window or something like that. I'd never seen someone with like, I don't know a lot of people who own cool art, I guess, but they had this thing in their living room basically, and it was super cool. So anyway, since then I kind of thought like, oh, that'd be pretty cool to do some video art, but it's a lot of ideas that are like just slowly. I'm just giving it time.
Slowly percolating.
Yeah, I'm giving it some time to percolate so I can see where it all heads, I guess. But anyway, yeah.
Do you tend to read a lot of books in your downtime, or what sort of things do you keep your mind occupied when you're not shooting for clients?
Yeah, also a good question. I watch a lot of movies, not all of which are good because we'll call it cinema. But movies, I like movies.
We'll call it cinema.
Some are cinema, some are like art pieces, some are just terrible movies, zombie movies or whatever.
Which ones?
Well, like my favorite movie is Suspiria, but I like a lot of, I like...
The new one or the old one?
Well, the old one, I only saw the new one recently, which had terrible reviews, but I actually kind of liked
I haven't seen either, actually.
Dude, check out the original. It's really cool. You'll be inspired for sure.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about Suspiria.
I mean, it's super gnarly and also like a really beautiful movie and changed a lot of things. Like I think you'll see so much influence in like Nicholas Winding Refn or whoever from those Suspiria, you know. But yeah, I like a lot of monster movies and stuff from the 80s, horror movies, like when things were real, like they were mechanical, they were, you know, makeup and prosthetics, like and puppets. Yeah, like The Thing. I mean, it's just insane and it feels so much more tactile, even though it's like sometimes a little bit hokey, you know. They just feel so much more tactile. Like for me, like in spite of doing the CGI art stuff I was talking about, like CGI stuff does very little for me in movies. And so seeing like, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street or whatever, it's like, I don't know, it's amazing the stuff they did and the amount of creativity and also complete insanity. Cause I don't know, for some, like horror movies, I think are like a starting out point for a lot of directors and like a proving ground, you know, kind of. So some of that stuff is completely off the walls, which I really like. You know, so. Yeah.
I mean, the first Alien and also Aliens, I mean, well, especially the first one, they're extremely creative and the different angles that they had. And, you know, I mean, that movie still is frightening.
Oh man. Yeah. It's incredible what they did. And the atmosphere, like the amount of atmosphere they create is just so cool. You know, I think now half the ship would be a render or something, but everything there just looks so tactile and a little bit grimy. And like, they just did such an amazing job, like making you believe it. So yeah. So I watched a lot of movies. I did read a lot of books.
Well, there's that utilitarian thing that you're talking about too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely like, and I like the craft of it. You know, it's just so cool that people actually built that stuff.
This episode of Artist Decoded is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Every day, Mubi premieres a new film, each one thoughtfully handpicked from new directors to award winners. Beautiful, interesting, incredible movies. There is always something new to discover. In this episode with Graham, we were talking about horror movies, so I went back and watched the contemporary classic 1999 Takashi Miike film, Audition. And it was just as terrifying as I remember it, but what I really love about Mubi is their vast catalog of indie films and films that I've been dying to watch, no pun intended. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/artistdecoded. That's mubi.com/artistdecoded for a whole month of great cinema for free. Now, back to the episode. Do you ever see yourself doing a feature film?
I mean, I would love that, but the problem for me is like I get caught up in some I get caught up in the technical, you know, like the cameras and that sort of stuff, you know? And so, and every time I do a client job and it's got a video component, like sometimes there's a DP or just a completely separate motion team, but often I shoot it myself and I'm just looking through the camera and directing like I would a stills thing, you know? And so to do a feature and like write it or direct it or be the DP, you know, like those are kind of the jobs. Like everything's so much more, separated out and specified in movies. And so like to pick one thing would be hard for me, but it's very rare that you would direct and shoot a movie, you know? So I don't even know where to begin there. I'd love it. I think I'll just start small, probably. Yeah. Are you still doing a lot of motion work?
Not particularly. I mean, I've taken kind of a back seat in, you know, certain ways with my own art stuff, but I've been writing a lot more, but that's more so just for me to practice on that.
Yeah. Is it like fiction or nonfiction or personal stuff or
a little bit of both? Yeah, personal stuff, journaling, and I'm working on like a screenplay and
awesome.
There's various things.
Yeah, so all disciplines of writing, all different.
Yeah, because eventually, I mean, like, I don't know. I just think about the longevity of things in general. So that's from financial longevity to creative longevity. And on the creative front, I just see myself when I'm like in my 80s, you know, like going out for runs and coming back and sitting there and writing or something, kind of like how Murakami does. Although, you know, in habit, I mean, he's just like a fantastic writer. Yeah.
But I mean, practicing it and journaling seems good. My wife's a big believer in that, like like journaling and writing down your thoughts and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And also just doing it often. I think that seems pretty helpful.
Yeah.
I don't do that, but it's good you do.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you write at all?
That was another thing I did that I totally forgot about actually during COVID is I wrote like 2/3 of a children's book for my son. Well, he's not really, I mean, he's a child, he's almost 9, but he's not like a little child. He's a kid, you know?
Yeah.
So I wrote like this kind of like, really terrible, you know, mystery in a small town with secret panels and supernatural and stuff like that. And I never finished it because it was just not going well. And my wife was like, just keep going. Like the first draft's supposed to be terrible, but I haven't finished it yet. I kind of want to read him the bad version and just see what he thinks and maybe he can weigh in on it. But,
yeah, it could be a collaboration.
yeah, I think that'd be cool. But it's like 30, 40 pages long. I got kind of into it. And then I was just, and again, I was like, okay, next thing, you know, cause
Yeah.
you know, again, jack of all trades, master of none. So
Yeah.
I just try a lot of things. My dad's a writer.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's a travel writer, and my mom's a really good writer too. So,
Oh, okay.
I try to do it, but not regularly, not like you do.
Well, I mean, I think it's just like any discipline. It's just a practice, right?
I think so.
So I wouldn't even say that I'm a good writer at all. I just am trying to figure it out. You know, it's, but I kind of like that beginner's approach to a lot of things. That's why I always try new things.
Yeah.
Is, jack of all trades, master of none. I mean, like for instance, photography is something that I'll always come back to. It's one of those things where I feel like I've mastered my specific approach, you know, and that'll transform over time. But I think I have a solid base of the way that I like to see an image to understand what I'm trying to say with it.
Yes.
With writing, it's kind of like, I don't know quite what I'm doing, but that's just kind of like the exciting thing too.
Yeah. Something totally new.
Yeah. But like, you know, with the podcast, like I understand the way that I interview people. I know like kind of the things I want to get across, and like I understand the approach. In the beginning, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, like at all. I know what I was doing.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure. Yeah. It's totally new, but it's kind of a leap too. Like, yeah, you just jumped in with the learning curve because you can't like do practice podcasts, I guess, you know, you got to just try it and see how it goes. And so you did, you know, but you learn about the technical stuff or whatever as time goes on, or how interviews go or conversations. But that's when you kind of, like with writing, you could keep it to yourself for a while. With a podcast, you kind of got to just go for it, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, how many have you done now? Do you know?
We just released episode 200 this week.
Wow. Congrats.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
So you said 2016, so 7 years, something like that?
2015.
Oh, 15.
Yeah. So I started recording in July of 2015, and then I released the first episode on September 3rd, which is my birthday, in 2015. So I turned 29, you know, the day that I put the podcast out.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh yeah. We're the same age, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Man, 200. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. Yeah. I wanted to ask too, just because I'm so interested in pursuing a career in the arts, whether that's commercially or, you know, fine art or whatever that may be in creative practices. And then also balancing that out with family life. And I think a lot of that, at least from my understanding and the things that I value, comes from values, you know, comes from what the things that you value the most, you know, and then that will trickle into all of these other facets of your life, you know. And so I'm curious, recently I wrote down the things that I value the most in my life, but I'm curious, you know, what sort of things do you value the most, and how does that go into your career?
I mean, yeah, like I said, you know, I have a wife and son, and he's in school, he's in 3rd grade, and my wife teaches kinder. She's about to start teaching 5th next year. And so that's been one nice part of COVID, is like getting to see them a lot, which is great, you know? So that I like. And I think like having a weird amount of some free time and also seeing them a lot, like I think COVID helped a lot of people kind of, you know, both the time and the direness, like helped a lot of people kind of sync what was important to them obviously they're important to me, and like I travel for work, but I usually don't go super long time. Rarely am I gone more than like 5 days, even if I'm going like somewhere super far away, because you just kind of go in, shoot everything, and leave. Because the turnaround on things is quick. So usually it's these whirlwind tours, and I'm mostly home, even if I'm shooting and get home at 8 or whatever. So like now, I mean, we had a lot of COVID rules, like where we were just watching TV and eating dinner in front of the TV kind of thing, and now we're trying to like get more. Eat at the table and like take more time. Another thing that we do together is like, and my son is the one who drives this, is like highlights, lowlights of your day, which is kind of like a gratitude practice, which is really nice. And we kind of all just like tell each other the best and worst things of the day and how we deal with those, whatever situations or kindnesses that you witnessed or a kindness you did for someone, things like that, just to keep you kind of like, just like present, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah.
So those are super nice. Reading to my son too. Like I try to read to him every night now. We're reading Animal Farm right now.
I just read Animal Farm.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh,
I just read Animal Farm recently. Cause I've been practicing, just intaking a lot of books while I go on long bike rides or on runs.
Oh, so audio? You do it as audiobook?
I do a lot of audiobook just because of the accessibility to it. And you can
cool.
I generally like to do 2 tasks at once.
Yeah.
Depending on what they are, but yeah, listening to audiobooks and going on a run or on a bike ride is meditative.
That's a good idea. I was just listening to music and because I feel like I don't want to focus, but my wife loves podcasts and stuff. And that's like, every time she's not working or whatever, she's listening to podcasts. So I should try that actually. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
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 I just read him, like a chapter a night basically. But yeah, we're liking Animal Farm so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, like those kind of things, those are all family things that I mentioned, but yeah, those kind of things are important. And also like, I think even though I don't love routine sometimes, I think those certain rituals are helpful probably. And like, so I try to stick to those a little bit. I don't know what else, like a lot of stuff is work focused and I'm just lucky that like my hobby and my job and all that stuff is basically the same thing. Mm-hmm. Like that's pretty narrow window, but it's just something like I've tried a lot of things in life. And like, that's the thing that stuck is photography. And so it's kind of like the other big part of my life, I guess, so I try to do that and like focus on that and learn about that all the time. And yeah, I mean, I watch movies, I read, I hike sometimes, that kind of stuff. But it can be hard to keep a balance, I think. Like if you get super busy, like you just have to do it. Like there's no choice, there's deadlines, there's whatever. So it's just kind of all in when it's time. And then there are down days between or things like that where you feel like you don't have a lot to do or you have things you probably should do. But I try to just once in a while just not do that because I'm someone who like usually like has to be busy or has to be doing quote unquote work to feel like I was productive. And I don't know that that's always productive, and I think maybe this COVID stuff has shown me like, it's okay to go for a hike at 10 in the morning, once in a while, go ahead,
But I think that's just a symptom of our working class culture as well is, I think that's kind of the American narrative is, pull yourself up from your bootstraps and, work hard and that sort of thing. And that's part of like the American pride almost. But for positive and negative things, I mean, I think, that, there's a certain drive to want to accomplish something, but I think what I've understood is that being able to have balance between a lot of these things is probably the most healthy for the long term.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. It feels weird because we're not in a 9-to-5 kind of world, where it's like, you have a set amount of hours per week or whatever, and people work way over that. And people have all kinds of other jobs with crazy schedules that like, like some of the parents of kids my wife teaches and stuff have like crazy schedules and like, I don't know. I feel lucky, I guess, to do these things. It's like an onslaught of work and then a couple of days lull, kind of thing. And I don't keep a regular schedule. Like I'll work on Sunday if I have to work on Sunday, but I'll, if on Monday I needed to go do something, like I'm grateful that I could just like go do an errand or, whatever it is, like keeping that balance. But it's easy to get caught up. It's easy to get caught up at the office, I think, of like, you don't want to be the first one to clock out, but same in freelance life, like staying focused. You don't want to be like maybe overly focused. Cause also like what you said earlier, like all those different things you do inform your job, So if you go to a museum for half a day, sure. That's probably pretty helpful actually.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I've always viewed you as being a really balanced person. I don't know what the internal like reality.
Yeah, it looks crazy. It looks like silly string sprayed all over everywhere. No.
Well, I mean, I think that it just I don't know, it just happens sometimes, right?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a certain amount of that that's probably necessary, I don't know if it's like a type of brain or whatever it is, but like I said earlier too, like I was thinking about that. I'm like, my desk is like super neat and I'm, focused in meetings and like
you're always on time.
Yeah. I try to be that kind of stuff,
You're always so punctual. I always remember that about you. You're always
good.
like there like 5 minutes before. Okay. It's always 5 minutes before.
That's good. Yeah. I like that. But like that kind of meticulousness or whatever, like, oh, I need to get good grades kind of mentality is, like sometimes photo shoots is like the relief from that, cause it's like chaotic or you're adapting to like things that come up like, oh, well today it's raining and we needed the sun or whatever it is, like those kind of things, or like, hey, the light looks cool over here. Let's just go over here and shoot this thing or whatever it is, like that adaptability because you essentially did your homework, beforehand. That's like a nice freedom, I think. So for me, that's like recreation in some ways, kind of, at least from my brain, which is like, feels like it wants to be very ordered. Like I'm one of those people who gets really, like I get really agitated when things are in chaos, like my room's a mess or something like that. I'm just like, I feel it kind of, I don't know if that's a real thing. I've heard that is, but anyway, it feels uncomfortable kind of if I have like a big mess on my desk or whatever, which is weird. So I think it's hard on my family, but also, the shoots are a place to like, just let it go kind of. And that's nice.
Yeah.
Like, I really like that.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's important to, what you're saying. It's important to understand the way that your brain works and the way that you intake, visual stimuli or, certain things that you need to be orderly in your life so that you can be able to be more adaptable in chaotic situations. If you have, like 3 backup cameras or let's just say 2 backup cameras, I guess, then that if your main camera gets broken or something on set, then you at least have 2 more to fall back on, and being able to have those safety nets. I think that's just that's also something that, talking about like non-compartmentalizing things, like if you can have those various safety nets, whether it's like financially or, you can bring this back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If your bottom needs are met, like your survival needs, then you can, go and reach a point of more self-actualization because you've covered your bottom line essentially. Right. So I think it's good to understand from a neurological perspective, like how your brain works, what are your trigger points. And that's just about knowing yourself. And we can bring that back to the art of war, which I was talking about earlier. By knowing yourself, you can, knowing yourself and knowing your enemy, then you can win every battle. Right. But I think about that in terms of knowing yourself, knowing your enemy. Enemy can be not necessarily be an enemy in a fighting situation, but it can be an external sort of factor, right? Which can also be talked about about stoicism, and just interesting, like the older you get, the more that you understand yourself, the more that you can see these patterns forming, and the more that you read, the more that you can connect those patterns to other things.
Yeah, I think that's true. And yeah, as you get older, you've been in more and more situations and more, you just like filed away a lot of things that you didn't used to know kind of. And so you can kind of draw on those things when you need to. And yeah, knowing yourself and knowing how to avoid situations that would like be problematic. Like you said, like bring 2 cameras, that kind of thing. Like so much of our world is like, it's just adapting to situations. It's adapting to everything. Like you need to just be a quick problem solver. If that's like gaff taping something, or that's like completely rerouting the shoot or whatever, any of that stuff. That's a big factor, and not letting that, like throw you off course basically. 'Cause no matter what happens, you're there to do that job, and no one's going to want to hear about it in 2 months. Like, oh, well, it rained that day. They're just going to want to see good pictures, you know? So you got to just do it. You got to figure out a way, you know, and experience teaches you that.
How do you adapt to those situations? Like specifically when there's a situation where you need a specific kind of light, but it's raining that day.
Oh yeah. I mean, there are a lot of,
does that happen like once a year?
There were a few years where that happened more than once a year, like 5, 6, 7 times, you know?
Wow.
Because most people want, you know, for my personal stuff, I like the overcast. I like that, you know, I'll go shoot black and white in clouds, you know, and I think that's cool. But
well, you like that Peter Lindbergh sort of classic.
I love it.
Yeah.
But it's a rare client who wants a moody black and white. They almost always want something that looks like fun and, you know, like saleable, basically. Like you want, like you want the consumer of whatever that photo is to be like, I wish I was that person, you know, or I was part of this group or whatever. And so, you know, like if it's raining out and you want it to be sunny, there's a lot of things I do. One big one is managing client expectations, because you kind of got to be like, hey. Well,
that's the psychology behind it too.
That's it. Yeah. You got to kind of just be like, hey, and you know, the ones who are really experienced, they already know. They don't need to have that explained to them, you know?
Yeah.
But you feel bad sometimes for people because they had one thing and they're going all in on this shoot and it's a smaller brand or whatever. And, you know, so there's factors like, you know, obviously like you can do stuff to the photo, like warm it up a little bit and that sort of thing. You can light things the best you can. Sometimes I warm up the light. I'll use strobes. I'll use silver side, you know, beadboard and stuff like that to get a little more punch to the light. And sometimes I'll use like hot lights or bare heads or something that's pretty like harder, like a single hard source that's far away that feels a bit like sun. Shooting against walls and greenery and stuff where you don't see the sky, because that's a big giveaway. Like no matter how like orange you make the photo look, your eye is trained to know that like sunlight's hard and clouds are soft, you know?
Yeah.
So if it's raining, it's often a lighting thing. It's often a color thing. It's often, you know, shooting a little bit tighter, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes like at the beach or something, you kind of don't know it's raining, you know, because that sky can look a little bit white and it's okay. But, you know, generally speaking, I don't do a lot of tricks. I usually play things as they lie a little bit and then I modify the light. I think a lot of clients are like, well, can you light stuff? Can you shoot studio? What do you do if it's super sunny? These kind of things. Like they think that I don't, modify my photos in some way, which I almost always do. Like there's almost always something going on. If it's just simple bounce or whatever it is, or positioning people, you know, there's always some consideration there. And so like, ideally people don't know it's lit, you know, but, people ask me those questions sometimes thinking I don't light stuff. Like I just shoot natural light only.
But that's kind of good.
I think it's good. Yeah. But I've definitely had times before when they're like, do you shoot studio? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And a lot of it's lit. You just hopefully don't know. But, you know, I've definitely lost jobs before because people thought I wasn't, you know, like a lighting person or something like that.
Yeah.
But
like technically proficient in that way.
I think so. Yeah. But I mean,
but that's kind of the art of it too, is being able to make a location shoot, you know, being able to adapt to those things like a rainy day, but still making it look like it's daylit.
Yeah.
Or, you know, to be convincing in that way where you use strobes, but you only use it to like fill in a specific area, you know, and those sort of things I never really got that good at, you know? And I think in some ways, I mean, I don't know. We all have our specific like trajectory of things, I think. And just because I'm myself, like I can look back at those things and say like, oh, like, I don't know, I wouldn't be good in those situations, you know?
Well, but I'm sure you could. And there's also like, I try a lot of different things, you know, and then see kind of what works. And then I over time have a sense of like, cause specifically most of the things I do are supposed to feel naturalistic, you know, but there's tons of people who are super successful where everything's lit with hot lights or whatever. And it like, that's their thing, or everything's gelled, or things are, you know, whatever, like people intentionally show lit photos too, you know, and that can be really nice, I think too. I just started out like kind of DIY, you know, like just natural light and, you know, I'd scan the film myself and that kind of stuff. And so I didn't come up through assisting or something and know a lot or have access to a lot of gear, you know? And so I just started out naturalistic, and then eventually I had to be able to produce that on command every time, you know? And so it's not that I couldn't take this photo in natural light. It's just today I can't, you know, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I try to approach like the Scout as like making a movie, you know, and I think I just use like, I track the sun path and think like, okay, we want to be here in the afternoon between like 2 and 3, sun will be coming through here. I try to think about situational stuff about the sun, which like, to a client or something is invisible, and that's fine. Not that they don't see the sun, but they don't know like I'm making a choice. They might think I just point my camera and shoot at wherever we are at that time, but there's choices I make to use the sun to my advantage, I guess, and that sort of thing. But it's nice to have like a cool lighting project too, and just light something, you know.
Yeah.
Like I have that studio downtown, and in there I'm like lighting stuff all day, because even making a point to just like we have great windows, but I'll make a point to be like, I'm gonna shoot this one, make it look like a window, but it has to be lit by strobe, you know? I'm just setting like little challenges for myself to like see, okay, this looks just like a window, you know, or this failed and looks too punchy or whatever it is. And then I can kind of file that away, you know, for later. It's like a secret little like arsenal of tricks, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah.
So that way you can kind of have naturalistic ways of lighting things, I guess, you know?
So I'm curious too, like, you know, being mostly self-taught, do you have anyone that you've been over the course of time, like mentoring, or I don't know, whether it's like assistants or?
Not really. Although, I really would like to teach, you know, I think that would be really fun, teach a class. Like always, if something comes up at a school or like, I mean, you know, a podcast or something like that, I like to do that because it's cool. Like it's cool to pass on some of that stuff that was like kind of hard fought knowledge, you know, because I was just stumbling around, and it'd be cool. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had a few people on set who are just interested in learning. I've had an intern before, that kind of thing. But, you know, like my friend and main assistant I work with, like some things we learn together. Sometimes he works with other people and tells me things, sometimes vice versa. But generally he's like totally capable on his own. So I'm not sure he learns a lot from me necessarily, especially because I have ways of doing things, and we've spent so many days together now. We kind of just have an unwritten system of just like, we'll just do this thing here, you know?
Yeah.
Because those things have proven themselves to be successful, I guess, so that they work, you know? But I would like to teach. And like I said, my wife's a teacher, and I think it's satisfying to kind of like almost write down things or like convey things to other people that, you know, now at this point, almost like sort of subconsciously, you know, kind of like I can kind of feel out how a room would be like, want to be lit, kind of, to feel realistic, I guess. But at the beginning, I really, really couldn't. And, you know, eventually those things become sort of second nature a little bit, but it'd be nice to pass it on to somebody. So hopefully one day. Yeah. I'd enjoy it for sure. But no, not yet. Not really. No mentorship or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And it's tricky, you know, it can be tricky because I've thought about this before, and like I have brought people on set before, but you know, on client jobs, it's a little bit different because sometimes there's like contracts or NDAs, or sometimes, you know, the client has to order extra lunches or whatever. It could be just simple things. And usually that's fine. But you know, that other person is someone who's like, they're on set, they're doing a job, they're not really being paid, or maybe they are, but it's just small, you know, or it's kind of a mixed bag on client shoots, I guess, bringing a sort of a third party who's kind of unknown to people, you know? And so I don't do that often. Yeah. You know,
you just have to fill out the situation.
Yeah. Or sometimes I'll bring someone on as like a second assistant who's maybe not super experienced, because my main assistant is very experienced, you know? Yeah. And so they can kind of learn too, you know, hopefully. But yeah, I do think being on set's a good way to learn, though. If you wanted to learn something, like I personally, not to badmouth school, but I would pick that over school, because I think you can learn things a lot quicker. You can learn things in a current manner of working with like current technology, which sometimes school just by nature of it can't. You can see how people interact with clients and other things. It's like much more subtle, because I think when you go to school, you're thinking about like technical, how to print, how to light. And there's a lot more to it than that. And I think actually, you know what, out there's a lot of really technical photography, but maybe some of those people are difficult. And there's a lot of kind of untechnical, maybe not even like it's just like maybe not great or something, but that person's awesome to work with, or they catch such a cool moment, the technicalities don't matter, or whatever it is, So there's so many other factors that go into it than just like the gadgets. And it's really easy to get caught up in that part of things, I think, if you're, gear minded, which I think I am to some extent. So that was a long rambling answer, but yes.
No, you're fine, man. So I was going to ask about photo agents. So like, what would you say to someone that is looking for a photo agent in particular, and someone that, because I've had my various experiences with working with different agents and things like that, but I was curious what yours were.
I've had a couple. I signed to one when I was pretty young and inexperienced. I think probably at that time I was shooting a certain thing in LA that was kind of on the come up. I think it was like a lot of kind of bohemian stuff, a lot of like desert. I don't know. Just a sort of a thing that was like a trend that I was kind of tied to maybe a bit. It was kind of like a little, I don't know if it's a scene, but it was just a little something becoming popular. So anyway, I signed pretty young, pretty inexperienced. That was fine. I never knew anything different. And then eventually, I think, I moved on to my current rep now, which is like I could kind of move into a lot of other things that I was interested in doing too. And I really like them a lot. And, they have an office here and also on the East Coast, which is also nice because usually you're represented in one place. It's not like a model who would have, 10 different agents. Usually you have one or two. And so the fact that they're in both coasts is nice. I think that's helpful. And, I know a lot of people, and I think I see more and more, a lot of people who are representing themselves, huge photographers, like way big deal people, are their own reps sometimes too. So I think there are a lot of ways to approach it. And there are a lot of different genres too, like you don't necessarily want to be at an agency where everyone's just like you because you'll probably compete for work.
Yeah.
You want to be, I think, and I am, like kind of a sort like small fish in a big pond kind of, like, so it's nice like that I look up to a lot of the photographers or, that kind of stuff and like hope to be there, kind of, because that means you got, there's some growing room for you, I guess. It's like buying your shoes a little too big kind of,
Yeah.
And so, that's a nice thing to look for too, I don't think it's mandatory. You know what I mean? Like, I think like coming in a little more junior kind of is kind of good, It's like you, what's the other one? That's like if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. That saying, it's like, like it's cool to see photographers I've followed their work and look up to, and so that's nice. And I suspect like when they move on from a job or something, those could fall to you as kind of like, that sort of thing. So I think representation's good. It's helpful. It's also, I think, helpful because clients feel like, hey, we're staking a bunch of money on this person. It's nice to see that there's someone backing them, kind of, and they're not just like backed by themselves essentially. But I think in today's world, that's like, it's not totally necessary to be represented. You obviously have to, your agency takes a commission,
Yeah.
So you can, potentially keep more money, but they also can potentially get you jobs or negotiate things for you. So it's a give and take there. But I mean, people blow up overnight on Instagram just by being super talented and putting their stuff out there. So the path is a lot less defined, and people aren't necessarily assisting to become a photographer. They're just going straight for it or whatever it is. There are a lot of routes into the world now. A lot of people also are shooting motion or like new media content, like they shoot like GIFs or, VR content or whatever it is, like all that kind of stuff. So I think there's room probably for every approach. I like having a rep personally because it's nice to have someone help you like in all the ways, they can help steer you. They can help pitch you. They're like a confidant. They're, someone who is, just gives you some like clout, kind of, cause they like they're a fallback for clients, kind of like clients feel like, okay, someone trusts him, we'll trust him, So I think that's all helpful. So I'm happy in the situation I'm in, I guess, but I also don't have a ton of experience in that because I've only had two. And I think people bounce around a lot pretty often.
Yeah,
so
definitely. Yeah. Well, cool. I mean, I have, I just have one more question for you, and I ask this of every guest.
Okay.
So what sort of advice do you have for artists and creatives?
I mean, the main thing that occurs to me that probably a lot of people have said is just, and I've said this before myself, like, I think just keep going, because in the short term, there are so many hurdles that you hit. It can be so disheartening. And also there's that Ira Glass thing too, which is a quote I always think of, which I can't quote, but to paraphrase, he's basically like, your taste level and your ability don't match yet, kind of, or may never match, but you're always like, he started out like, making audio pieces and, journalism and all that stuff. And he, wasn't achieving the level he wanted to. And then slowly he got there, piece by piece until he got to where he was at. But he realized like, his taste and his like level of, like his desire to be a certain thing, like he wasn't there yet, cause mechanically you have to just kind of, do things and it feels way slow at first. And then you get to maybe like 90% good, where you're kind of, a lot of people can do the thing you do, but then it's just those little tiny subtleties to build those like 0.2% at a time of, both your ability and your style and all that kind of stuff. But I think it comes from just like perseverance, which is in the abstract easy to remember, but in the short term, it's like, it can be really tough. I think, you're really crawling on hands and knees, in many ways, and there are so many, 2 steps forward, 1 step back situations where you're just, there's setbacks and you lose jobs and all these kind of things, and you have to just keep going, I guess, I think, and I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know where I'm headed, you can only look backwards, but, I think like just persistence is important, because that'll help you get where you need to go, kind of wherever that may be. And you don't know where that may be, it's hard to plan for.
Definitely.
That's what I would say.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, yeah, I like that.
Cool.
Well, cool. Thanks for taking this time and doing this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on here.
Of course. Yeah. You were episode 6, I think. Was it?
Maybe so. It was early days,
like
I think. Yeah. Early days.
Was it 6 or was it 12? No.
I don't know.
One of those. One of the first 15 you were in there.
Nice.
Yeah. But you were actually, I think you were the first person that I actually interviewed.
Oh, like in person?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having me back around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it's cool. It's really fun. Like, it's nice. It's nice to like articulate things that you don't, like, I don't think about things in specificity all the time, Yeah. It's kind of like just a vague swirling of thoughts, but like the podcast is nice because you can kind of like have a conversation and put things into words, kind of, which is cool.
Yeah.
So.
Extrapolate on the things that kind of may just be swirling around your brain.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's like things but didn't ever like write down, so it's kind of like that. You like, get more clear.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. All right. Thanks, man.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye. Bye. We're standing right in front of each other.
I walked out the room.
Drop the mic. Music for the podcast is by Rarebit, aka Justin Dosher Hopkins. Creative producer is Noah Wainwright. YouTube and creative support is by Tyler Scully. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you next time.